Infamously Bad Metal Albums Part 6. Roots is the sixth studio album by legendary band Sepultura, and it's probably better to call this one infamously divisive as opposed to infamously hated. There are not many bands in this world that are able to record banger after banger in their early years, a time when bands were traditionally still carving out their sound and making a name for themselves. Sepultura, formed in 1984 by the Cavalera brothers, did just that, starting with first wave black metal inspired Morbid Visions and slowly evolving their sound into a much more iconic, thrashy, groovy state of affairs. But come the late 90s and the unstoppable rise of nu metal was leaving no prisoners, and most of the world's biggest bands were either dying as heroes or living long enough to see themselves become the villains. And what I mean by that is that the late 90s saw many extreme metal bands take heavy influence from nu metal for at least one album or two, giving birth to albums such as Napalm Death's Diatribes and the aforementioned Roots. Roots was in many ways a large departure from the iconic thrashy sound, but also a full awakening of the growing groove and world elements from Chaos AD, and this is manifested into a beast of its own. Taking direct influence from Korn's debut, Roots was heavy, it was down-tuned, slower paced, and even included the occasional breakdown or two, with big emphasis on impactful drumming and angsty aggression. The big selling point here, however, was Roots' massive emphasis on embracing the Brazilian heritage of the band, and this album marked one of the first times such a heavy world music influence was paired with the aggression of nu metal or thrash metal, and that on its own makes this a landmark record in ways. But of course, just like many albums in this series, this departure in sound would create a divide in the fan base, and even today opinions on this album range from it being the worst in the discography to the absolute best. In my opinion, this album's biggest problem is its monstrously exhausting runtime. Sitting at an absolutely staggering 72-minute runtime, even the band admitted it was hard trying to prevent Roots from becoming just one long, full-length jam session, and you can really feel it. Especially since this nu metal style is a step back in clever songwriting, and this is unfortunately just a flaw of the genre's design. I personally just preferred the balanced approach that Chaos AD takes to infusing their Brazilian heritage with memorable heavy metal. Aside from the big hits, I rarely come back to this album. What album should I do next?